Good afternoon, everyone. This is Captain Ando, and I call myself the Dark Star Strategist. So, I've had the question posed specifically in BCA Alliance chat. How do I crew specifically for PvP? People are looking at, for instance, the Augur. We'll take a look at that. And just ship crewing in general, because not everyone has the same ships. So you're not going to have a one-size-fits-all solution to crewing, but you can at least make some decisions based on what ships you have and what roles you have them play. Now, other than people who are in their high 40s where they have 6 slots, I have 5 slots. That's probably one of the most difficult setups. While I do have a very strong officer roster, I have a lot of research done and things like that. With this many ships to crew, I have to be very selective of how to crew them and make sure that I have all the elements in place. So now, in each of these situations, the first thing you want to do is take a look at what are my best PvP ships. Now, I do have a Valdor and I do have a Jellyfish. I do not use those for territories primarily because the Valdor specifically has a very high repair costs. So while it might perform the ultimate best in a combat situation, I could still burn an Enterprise probably 10, 15, maybe 20 times and repair it and get less cost than what the Valdor does to repair. So that's why I don't bring that out there. I don't, it'd have to be in a dire emergency where I'd want that ship strength to justify the cost of losing that unit. Now, the Jellyfish, on the other hand, it's just not a strong PvP ship. It's good for many things, but PvP, it'll lose. If I used my 6.2 million Jellyfish, no matter how I crewed it against my own Enterprise somehow, I would lose handily every single time unless I just didn't know how to crew my Enterprise. So primarily my choices for ships are all the tier 3 epics, as well as my Burrell, which is by and largely the strongest PvP rare ship, as well as my Discovery, which I also use that slot for my sarcophagus during our own defenses. So, a little bit about crewing them now that we've talked a little bit about the ships. Specifically, the way I crew this, I set my Enterprise as a Enterprise to Enterprise killer. Sometimes I take it against Valdors and win. Often clear out a lot of Jellyfishes people don't have the wherewithal not to bring. But it's generally an explorer killer, and that's the role I designate it for. Now, the Augur is actually more ideally suited to this, but considering I have a Tier 9 Enterprise and a Tier 5 Augur, it makes a lot more sense to use the Enterprise in that role, because it's very effective at it, and I've killed many explorer ships using this, often in a single hull, and some of them were also tier 9 but much more poorly crewed. Now, the next ship I have is my D4. My D4 is a tier 6, so it's a little stronger than my Augur. I use that specifically as an Augur killer, so it's designed to kill battleships, specifically Augurs. And my Burrell I design as an interceptor killer. And then the Discovery / sarcophagus role, that's primarily for no defense or getting my ships warped back in more quickly after they're gone, because no matter how well you do crew, you're going to lose your ships if you're doing your job in territories when it's openly challenged. It's just a question of how many ships you can take down before that happens, and how quickly you can redeploy before or after that happens. So that's the types of considerations you want to go into as far as crewing your ships to PvP. So the very first priority here, before you do anything else, you'll probably want to clear out all these underbelly slots here. I didn't actually ideally crew the Enterprise for this, but when you do that, you'll take a look at where your stats are. Notice how I'm down to 210% in both my attack and health. So those are types of things you want to bring up. And that's also so you have all your lower decks available for every ship here. So, and then you go ahead and put your crew selections in the top slots. Now, TOS Kirk with his 3D strategist, all that's there to do is that's there to crank up the damage of the energy weapons, and that's all the Enterprise uses. So that's why I chose him specifically, as well as he has the 80% chance to inspire morale of the ship for a round. That's what triggers Uhura's ability, which I've actually tiered her up to Lieutenant Commander. So she has a 16%. She ignored 16% of another player's shields, in addition to the 20% that's nominally goes directly to hull while a ship has shields up. And then I also have Alexander Marcus. He's the triangle officer I use specifically to target explorers. Now I have him maxed out, so he has, at least in terms of his officer ability, so he has a 1600% shield piercing against other explorers. That's an absolutely devastating combination. So now take a look at the next ship in the lineup, the D4. The D4 specifically, I had crewed, as I mentioned before, for killing other battleships. Now, the D4 has the ability to take advantage of hull breach, so that's why I run a breach crew to trigger the ship ability, increase the damage, and to take care of the triangle advantage against interceptors. That is through Charvanek. Now, she is my least tiered up triangle officer. She's one that I'm actively working on right now. She's currently only at 400%. If you remember, Admiral Marcus was at 1600%, so he's 2 tiers higher than her. When she's maxed out, she will also be 16%. And then the way I have it set up is I have quick victory to get those initial critical hit chance up. That's augmented by Kurla, who has critical hit damage with kinetic weapons, which for D4, that's everything. And also, in addition to that, I have the hull breach officer ability that Gorkin creates. After that, the only thing you need to do beyond that point is to add health officers. Once you're at 300% with all your attack, defense, and health, just make sure any additional officers that you use, okay, are specifically triggered towards health benefits. So Livis is one, and in this case, the ideal case would probably be Bones. That'll give you the biggest health advantage to trigger Charvanek's Mind Games ability and make that as strong as possible and do more damage against specifically against battleships. So now, my interceptor killer is my Burrell. So the way I've done that is pretty standard. Instead of Kirk, Spock, Khan, though, I go Kirk, Spock, Kang. Kang is the triangle officer for taking out interceptors. He boosts accuracy, so that's going to increase damage against a high dodge characteristic that interceptors live by. So he's going to do more damage against interceptors like Saladins, D4s, things like that. Now, being this is a tier 9 Burrell, it can take pretty high tier D4s on and do rather well against them. And then having the Kirk Spock, that's just the shield generation from the standard morale, very good on explorers to keep those shields up as long as possible. So that's my choice for the Burrell. You can actually do a lot of other combinations. You can actually do all of Kang's Blood and Honor crew if you like, if you want to just do more damage. So if you have them available, you can run Mara and you can run Krell. And that is this optimum Blood and Honor crew. That'll give you 3 rounds of hull breach at first. So that'll give you an extra 80% more critical damage when you critically hit. And that will give you a better hull breach. With the hull breaches, you'll increase the dodge, which doesn't really help a explorer as much, but that's an officer ability that's available to you. And then you have the Federation context. So this, taking out Saladins and even Calvins, this would be a good setup here. You can also sort by their group and take a look at some of the other officers that they have available. You can look at Kuvug. He has additional accuracy you can add on, so he'd actually be a good choice for that Mara slot. And Linkasa, he has defensive tactics. That's more of a increasing the armor of the ships. That's more of a battleship ability. So you don't really want to use that. And Yanach is he would be a good way to take out Romulan ships. Now, I would not recommend that in most cases. Most people don't run. I mean, you'll run into the occasional what's it called? Well, the Romulan interceptor. But these are just some options that are available for you. The biggest key here is making sure you get that 300%, and then because Kang's primary ability is accuracy, you want to boost the attack stats as high as possible. So any additional officers you plug in, you want to make sure you're maxing out the attack stats. So I'm going to go ahead and discard those changes because that's not really that important, but that's what you want to do. You want to define the role, and you want to make sure your ship is well suited to take on that role. Now, in the case of my auger, since I'm out of triangle officers, I make this more of a general purpose killer. So now, those who have the auger should know that obliterate, the ship ability, is triggered by burning. So in a PvP situation, you would be silly not to run a PvP crew that includes burning in the lineup. And since it's a general role, if you want to use it as an enterprise killer, you'd want to swap where I have Tyler in for Marcus. But in this case, since it's a general purpose use, I'm throwing in Tyler. That further exploits the burning element by the total attack of all officers on the ship. So I run Kumak as the primary officer. He increases the stats of officers by 10%. And then, as long as the ship is burning, he increases the armor, shield deflection, and dodge stats. That will make you survive more hits from the enemy. So bringing up your mitigation stats will increase your armor, most specifically, by a certain amount. So that will make the ability for the enemy to do damage to you a lot lower. So that's how you want to trigger it. And Nero, of course, triggers the burning. Another option for this lineup here, and in this case I would recommend probably running her as captain, if you want to go with it. And it's a perfectly viable thing. It's just not what I went with today. I was kind of lazy in my crewing. But you can also do Georgiou, and you can use her Never Fire First ability at the start of each round. If the opponent is burning, she decreases the opponent's attack of all officers of the ship by 100% for that round. Actually, I think that jumps up through officer synergy with, yes, up to 125% with Tyler. And she also has a burning ability. And the way hers works is, instead of per attack triggering it, it's a 50% chance that it gets triggered at the beginning of the round. And of course, as you tier her up as an officer, that will become even stronger. So she is actually considered to be the stronger of the two burning crew officers, the main ones, her and Nero. Charvenek plays a role in that, as well as some other Romulans. But out of the ones that actually cause it, you want to make sure that you want to have it in the officer slot, because officers like Charvenek actually serve more usage in anti-battleship roles, and that's not really what the auger is best suited for. It can be used that way, but it's something that you'd want to keep in mind here. Other officers, if you're really expecting to encounter specific opponents, you want to take advantage of officers that have an element of ability that in their officer ability that targets Federation or Romulans or things like that. So in that case, what you might want to do, excuse me, a good combination on the auger, if you're looking to take out most ships other than Enterprise, you can run Yuki in that role. So Yuki, what she does is she decreases the shield health of the opponent's ship by 10% each round. Once those shields go away, all the damage you're doing is going directly to the hull. So if people have Kirk, Spock, Khan, that usually works quicker than that. If you're working against an Enterprise, it does not. The Enterprise will recharge way more shields than Yuki Sulu will deplete. So if you're looking to take your Augur in an anti-Enterprise role, this is not the lineup for you. But it does have an increase in damage against Romulan ships by 500% of the health of the crew of the ship. So this would actually be a good lineup to take out other Augurs as well as D4s. But specifically, Augurs would suffer the most in this lineup because Yuki, she has an increased damage against Augurs. You'd be getting increased damage from Ash Tyler's burning increases and from Georgiou's chances of burning. And again, you could swap back Nero into this role because when it's in the sidecar, it's just who inflicts the burning and how often it procs. Nero is per attack, Georgiou is at the beginning of the rounds. There's the chance. So you both have a percentage chance of proccing. It's just a question of what procs it and how often it does. And that's just a judgment call for you. So those are the considerations there. Now, when you have the Discovery, I always just run with my standard mycelium network efficiency increases. So I run Stamets, and I also have his partner Culber in there to increase the cost efficiency of jumping and summoning. And the reason I do that and have the Discovery present is warp times can be critical in defending. You're going to lose your ships. The question is how quickly you can get them back and how quickly you can get them killing again. Having a Discovery in system, if it doesn't get directly attacked, will help. And I don't bother with the crude loadouts other than I just have officers that I kind of standard fare put in there. When I run the Sarcophagus, I will crew it differently, and I'll crew it specifically for node defense, and that's something I'll talk about in another discussion. That's a long conversation. There really isn't a lot of testing done. I've actually done some testing of an active Sarcophagus defense on a node, but there's a lot of things that can work good in theory. It's really just a question of actually seeing them used, whether they work or not. So that's hit or miss. But I will say this, that a 3.2 million Sarcophagus is roughly enough to defend against a Tier 9 Enterprise. So if you crew it well, you can expect to do very well against normal Epic Tier 3 ships. So now I want to make sure that people understand there's really no such thing as a perfect PvP crew setup. It's really just a question of having it well defined for the role it's in. So the first thing you want to do is take advantage of the triangle officers. Make sure you got the triangle officers attached to the ship that's designed to kill the specific role. After that, it's just making sure that the ships are taking advantage of their inherent ship's abilities. And that's really all there is to it. I wish I could give you a one-size-fits-all situations solution, but in PvP crews specifically, that just doesn't exist. You just have to know the role, know the abilities of the officers and how they benefit the ship you're in. Know the firing patterns too. For instance, in the Enterprise, I know firsthand that I have 2 phasers that fire every single round. So they have a charge time 1, recharge time run. They'll get 1 shot per round. So I'm going to get 2 phasers firing every round, and I have a disruptor bank that fires twice, but it only does it every even round, and that's how it works. The Augur is a little more wonky with its Obliterator weapon. The Obliterator weapon doesn't go every round. It actually goes on the second round and then every 3 rounds after that. So 2, 5, 8, 11, and it gets 1 shot. But as the other ship is burning, it's getting increases from that. And along with that, you have phaser turrets that fire 2 shots every round. So those are there to inflict burning. Nero works really well on this ship because all those shots are more attacks that can inflict burning. Those are some things to consider. You're looking at your D4. Now, if this was a Saladin, you'd get that big shot in the first round. The D4 is a little different. It actually has the kinetics, and their recharge time is 2. They fire the first round and then third, so on. Whereas this one is every even round, so you get the kinetics that fire every 2 rounds, and they'll do it in alternating rounds. So that's just things you want to keep in mind with your ship setups as well. Take advantage of all these types of things, know the firing patterns, and set up officer crews that supplement those firing patterns. And that's really all there is to it. Until you actually try it against something, it's hard to know for sure, but I can tell you these have worked extremely well for me in real live fire testing during challenges, of which I've participated in many. My kill death ratio is pretty high. It's pretty decent. It's about 2.4, and that's increased from a time when I was mostly doing PvE, and was well below the 1.0 mark. So, and I don't go out of my way to PvP in situations where people aren't being aggressive themselves. So I'm not one of those person who went back and cleared entire systems of miners or anything like that. So those are all considerations. I just wanted to lay that out there. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out in the Alliance chat or Discord. I'll try to address them. But yeah, all it is knowing what your ships are, knowing what their capabilities are, and knowing what roles you want them for, and taking advantage of that. And that's really all there is to it. This is Captain Ando. I'm the Dark Star Strategist. Live long and prosper. Signing out.